10 women walked away from him when he didn't look like wealth. The 11th didn't care. What she didn't know. He was one of the richest men in New York, and the most guarded. In a world obsessed with status, one hidden billionaire bets everything on finding a love that sees beyond the surface. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, casting long lines of light across the minimalist decor. A gentle hum of the city below murmured against the silence inside. The kind of silence that spoke not of loneliness, but of focus. Jamal Anderson sat at his kitchen counter, sipping black coffee from a plain ceramic mug. No gold trim. No brand logo. Just matte black ceramic, clean, practical, efficient. Much like Jamal himself. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up just above his elbows, revealing lean, strong forearms. His tie remained untouched on the kitchen counter. He didn't wear it unless he had to. Despite being the CEO of one of the most powerful privately held enterprises in New York, Jamal preferred to dress like any senior consultant in a midtown office. Nothing too loud, nothing to draw attention. His company, Anderson Holdings, had interests in everything from green tech to international logistics. Most people working under the umbrella of his corporate empire didn't even know his face. He was a ghost at board meetings, known more for his decisions than his presence. When he spoke, people listened. When he acted, markets shifted. But on the street, no one gave him a second glance. And he liked it that way. His phone buzzed. A message from his aunt, Patricia. Another one. She's the daughter of the hedge fund guy, remember? 7 p.m. at the bistro on 58th. Please don't wear that black sweater again. He smirked faintly and set the phone down. He didn't bother replying. Patricia had taken it upon herself to play matchmaker since the moment he crossed 30 and still hadn't introduced a serious partner. To her, status and legacy were intertwined. She couldn't understand why her nephew, the now multimillionaire head of a financial empire, insisted on keeping his wealth a secret from the women she introduced him to. But Jamal had his reasons. Deep ones. Reasons shaped by memories of nights in a shoebox apartment in Queens, eating ramen while coding into the dawn. Nights when he had dreams so big they scared people. Nights when women walked away after seeing he didn't even own a car. He thought of Clarissa, the one who had laughed in his face when he told her he was going to build a company from scratch. Or Maya, who left because ambition doesn't pay the rent. They weren't cruel. They were just honest, and brutally so. In a world obsessed with instant results and visible success, Jamal had chosen the long road. He stayed in, worked weekends, turned down vacations. He invested every spare dollar into his business. While others bought watches and shoes and champagne on payday, he bought books on venture capital and took online courses in business law. Now, his company was evaluated at over $2.6 billion. He could buy 10 Lamborghinis if he wanted. He could live on a yacht, take a helicopter to the office, wear diamond cufflinks to breakfast. But the bitter residue of those early rejections lingered. The women who laughed, who ghosted, who looked him over because he didn't fit the billionaire mold. They were etched into his memory like notches on a lesson learned the hard way. So now, with all his success, Jamal had chosen invisibility as his shield. To the outside world, he was simply Jamal, a CEO. A vague title his aunt shared with each potential match. No company name. No media presence. No extravagant displays. He wanted someone who asked questions, not calculations. Someone who wouldn't look past him if he wasn't wearing a Rolex or didn't arrive in a Bentley. Someone who could look at his soul, not his salary. But those women were hard to find. If they existed at all. He rinsed his mug and placed it carefully on the drying rack. Another date tonight. Another dinner of shallow questions, subtle evaluations, and one more disapproving glance at his quiet, classic wristwatch that didn't cost a fortune. He sighed. Then he straightened his collar, slipped on his coat, and stepped out the door. The city didn't know it, but the man walking among them in silence could change lives with a phone call. He just hoped one day someone would want to know him before knowing everything else. The Anderson estate in Upper Manhattan bore the elegance of old money and the polish of high society. Antique furnishings, oil paintings of stern ancestors, and a grand chandelier that had seen the rise and fall of generations hung above the mahogany dining table. In the heart of this refined domain sat Patricia Anderson, widow of a late ambassador and matriarch of one of New York's most well-connected families. Patricia was not a woman who took no lightly, especially when it came from her nephew Jamal. With a reputation for orchestrating high-profile galas, fundraisers, and most recently discreet matchmaking among New York's elite, she had built a network of powerful families who trusted her with access to their children's romantic prospects. To Patricia, marriage wasn't just a union. It was an alliance, a social architecture of influence, style, and legacy. She sat on her veranda with a tablet in hand, scrolling through social profiles and private portfolios. She'd made it her mission to find Jamal a woman who could match his level. Beautiful, cultured, from a good family. And if she came from money, even better. Her first candidate had been Isabel Rothschild, the daughter of a diplomat and an art gallery owner. She had a degree in art history from Yale and a fondness for travel. She and Jamal met at a high-end jazz lounge in Soho. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Jamal's watch. The moment she saw him walk in wearing a plain wool coat and polished leather shoes with no visible brand, her smile faltered ever so slightly. She covered it well, but Jamal caught it. She asked him what car he drove. He said he preferred to walk or take the subway. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, that's unusual. By dessert, they were both politely checking their phones. Isabel never followed up. Next came Vanessa Dupree, heiress to a wine dynasty with properties in France. Jamal met her at a rooftop restaurant Patricia had chosen for its skyline view and seasonal tasting menu. Vanessa asked about his company. Jamal said he was a CEO. Which firm? She asked. He shrugged. Just a firm I started myself. She smiled tightly. So you're a startup guy. Her laughter came too easily, too performative. She talked about Mykonos, her penthouse in Tribeca, and her frustration with men who dreamed big but lacked drive. Jamal said little. He wasn't judging, just observing. She too disappeared by morning. Then there was Serena, who led a philanthropic foundation, and Daphne, who modeled for a sustainable fashion label. Bianca was a Harvard law graduate. Chloe was building an AI company her father had invested in. Each one came with polished smiles, impeccable posture, and an expectation that Jamal would be just as flashy, just as assertively opulent. Patricia's instructions were simple. Never tell them the company name. Let them fall for the man, not the brand, she said. She didn't realize that in their world, the absence of visible wealth was almost an indictment. 10 women in total. 10 meticulously arranged blind dates. 10 daughters of prestige, elegance, and high birth. And each one walked away with the same sentiment. He's nice, but not really my type. The 10th date ended at an avant-garde fusion restaurant in Midtown. Jamal had arrived on time, held the door open, complimented his date's smile, and ordered a modest meal. His date, Alina, daughter of a tech billionaire, spent most of the evening alternating between her phone and her wine glass. So, you're a CEO. That's cool, she said. My dad's one too. Which venture firm backed you? No venture firm, Jamal said, smiling politely. I built it from scratch. Took a while. Alina tilted her head. From scratch. Her voice carried the tone of disbelief wrapped in thinly veiled condescension. That's admirable. They didn't order dessert. That night, Patricia called him. Well, she asked, not even waiting for a greeting. It was like the others, Jamal replied. You didn't wear that old coat, did you? I did. A heavy sigh echoed on the line. Darling, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm not looking for someone who sees my value in thread count, he said. Patricia paused. And I respect that. I do. But these women, this is the circle you belong to now. You're no longer the boy fixing laptops in Queens. But that boy made me who I am. Patricia fell silent for a moment. All right, she said, her voice softer. But let me try one more. Just one more. Jamal didn't argue. What was the harm? The first 10 hadn't broken him. He'd survived worse. And somewhere deep down, despite the disappointment, a part of him still believed that maybe, just maybe, someone out there might see him and not just the title. He just didn't know yet that his aunt's next choice would come from the most unexpected place. The Anderson chauffeur, an impeccably dressed man named Gerald, pulled up quietly to the curb in front of Baring's Organic Market, a boutique grocery store nestled in an upscale corner of the Upper East Side. It wasn't the kind of place Patricia Anderson usually frequented herself, but she was feeling adventurous that Tuesday morning. I'll only be a moment, she said, stepping out of the black luxury sedan with her signature burgundy coat draped over her shoulders and a silk scarf tied beneath her chin. The heels of her shoes clicked smartly against the tiled floor as she entered the store. Inside, the ambience was serene. Soft music played from ceiling speakers. The shelves gleamed with imported olive oils, organic teas, and glass jars filled with herbs hand-labeled in cursive. Patricia's eyes swept over the labels with a practiced ease. She had never needed to check prices. But she moved with the dignity of someone who had once known frugality and had vowed never to be caught unprepared. Her cart half filled with specialty cheeses and locally sourced honey, Patricia made her way to the checkout counter. She reached into her purse for her card holder and paused. It wasn't there. She rummaged again, lifting the edges of her scarf and tugging at the lining of her bag. Her breath hitched slightly, cheeks flushing, not from embarrassment, but frustration. She did not enjoy being flustered in public. And more importantly, she never lost things. Is there a problem, ma'am? The cashier asked gently. Patricia pressed her lips together. It seems I've misplaced my card. My driver may have. I'll take care of it. The voice came from behind, light, warm, and certain. Patricia turned to see a young woman, early 20s perhaps. Wavy hair tucked into a loose ponytail, no makeup, wearing a faded denim jacket over a simple cotton dress. She looked like someone who didn't belong in this part of the city, not because she didn't deserve to, but because her life was clearly rooted in different priorities. You don't need to do that, Patricia began, recovering her composure. I'd rather not. It was only groceries, the girl interrupted gently. Have a great day. She turned and walked away quickly before Patricia could get another word in. No posturing. No fishing for attention. Just kindness. Genuine and quiet. But Patricia Anderson was not the kind of woman to let a mystery go unexplored. As she returned to the car, she gave Gerald a curt nod. Gerald, I want you to follow her. At a respectful distance. And be discreet. Gerald raised an eyebrow through the rearview mirror, but he simply replied, Yes, ma'am. The car trailed the young woman through a few city blocks. She walked, humming softly to herself, bag in hand. She paused to help an elderly man pick up dropped keys at a crosswalk. No hurry, no phone glued to her face. Just presence. Awareness. Eventually, she reached a modest brownstone in Brooklyn. The area was clean but clearly working class, nothing trendy or gentrified. She disappeared through a side entrance without looking back. Patricia made a note of the address. 2 days later, she returned. This time, Patricia didn't wear anything extravagant. Just a soft gray coat and gloves and no chauffeur in sight. She knocked on the side door of the brownstone. When it opened, the same girl stood there, surprised but not startled. You followed me? Patricia gave a small, apologetic smile. I had to find you. I didn't like leaving debts unpaid. You don't owe me anything, the girl replied, amused. Well, I beg to differ, Patricia said, straightening her spine with aristocratic grace. You paid for my groceries, didn't ask for anything in return, and disappeared before I could thank you properly. I've lived a long life, miss. Nadia, she replied softly. Nadia, Patricia repeated with warmth. I've lived a long life, Nadia, and in that time, I've met very few people who offer kindness without expectation. Fewer still who do so with grace. May I come in? Nadia hesitated only a moment before opening the door wider. They sat on a small couch in a humble but well-kept apartment. Books stacked by the window. A half-finished sketch sat on the table. It smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Patricia sipped the tea Nadia offered and listened to her talk about her job at the community center, her scholarship, and how she was studying social work. She didn't complain. She didn't brag. She simply was. After nearly an hour, Patricia leaned forward, eyes sharp with purpose. I have a nephew, she began. Very private. Brilliant. He's been disappointed by what the world values. And I have a feeling, Nadia, that you might be exactly the kind of person he needs to meet. Nadia blinked. You're trying to set me up? I am. I'm not. Nadia began to protest. I know, Patricia said gently. You're not rich. You don't wear designer shoes. You don't network at black tie galas. That's precisely why I want him to meet you. Nadia gave a soft, surprised laugh. Well, when you put it like that. Patricia smiled. So you'll consider it? Nadia tilted her head. Sure. Why not? I trust people who drink tea without sugar. Patricia chuckled. And so the 11th blind date was set. Not with the daughter of a CEO or a fashion icon, but with a girl who paid for groceries, asked nothing in return, and simply walked away. It had been nearly a week since Patricia Anderson's unannounced visit to Nadia Carter's modest apartment in Brooklyn. But the conversation from that day had stayed with her like perfume on silk, subtle, distinct, and lingering. She couldn't shake the impression Nadia had left. Not just her kindness, but the ease of her presence. There was a groundedness in her that Patricia found both foreign and refreshing. In her circles, people mastered the art of performance. Politeness was currency. Small talk was warfare. But Nadia had no armor and no need for any. Patricia found herself thinking of her nephew Jamal more than usual. She replayed every awkward blind date, every stiff dinner, every polite but dismissive exit, and she saw the pattern clearly. Women trained by their environments to see men as assets. And Jamal, in his modesty and mystery, didn't fit their algorithm. But Nadia? Nadia asked questions like, what makes you smile when no one's looking? She brewed tea instead of ordering espresso. She lived in a space where money didn't dictate worth. And Patricia wondered, could such a woman see Jamal, not the CEO? Could she see the boy who once fixed old laptops in his queen's apartment for extra cash? The man who still stopped to give his umbrella to strangers? So she made a decision. 2 days later, she rang Jamal's number. He answered after the second ring, his voice warm but cautious. Aunt Patricia, another heiress on the horizon? Actually, no, she replied, adjusting the cuffs of her blouse as she stared out her library window. This time, I'm going to break my own rule. Jamal blinked, now pacing slowly through his office. You have rules. Of course I do, she snapped. And this one has always been. Only Para Anderson with pedigree. But this girl isn't rich. She isn't famous. She doesn't own a summer house or run a foundation. Jamal stopped pacing. Then why are you calling me? Because she's decent. She's kind in a way that doesn't know it's rare. She paid for my groceries without asking who I was, without asking for anything back. I had to chase her just to get her name. Silence on the other end. Her name's Nadia, Patricia continued. Lives in Brooklyn. Works part-time while finishing her degree in social work. Has a worn-out coat, a cat named Pickles, and the sort of laugh that doesn't come with an agenda. Jamal chuckled. Are you matchmaking or selling her at auction? I'm telling you the truth, darling. That's what I should have done from the beginning. I don't need charity dates, Aunt. It's not charity. It's clarity, she replied. You've spent too long shielding yourself. Maybe someone like her could meet you in the middle. There was a pause. Then, fine. Set it up. The day of the date arrived quietly, without the mental bracing Jamal had done for the last 10. No designer suit. No polished sports car. He took a cab, his preferred method, and wore his usual clean-cut style, gray blazer, crisp black shirt, no tie. Understated. Intentional. Patricia had chosen a cozy Italian restaurant tucked between two brownstones in a quiet Manhattan street. Low lighting, no paparazzi, no pretentious sommelier hovering. It smelled like fresh basil and old brick. Nadia was already seated when he arrived. She wore a navy blue dress, simple but lovely, paired with a pair of earrings shaped like tiny crescent moons. She wasn't scrolling through her phone. She was reading the wine list like it was a novel, her expression amused by the elaborate descriptions. Jamal stood a few feet away for a moment longer than necessary, observing. She was so still, so unlike the others. Then he stepped forward. "Nadia," he asked. She looked up and smiled, a real smile. Not the kind you give out of obligation. "Jamal." He nodded. They shook hands, hers warm, his steady. "You don't look like the CEO type," she said as they sat down. He raised an eyebrow. "And what does a CEO look like?" "Older, grumpier. Probably with a Bluetooth headset and an iced Americano glued to one hand." He laughed, genuinely. "And you don't look like the usual type my aunt sets me up with." "Ah, so I'm the odd one out." "Definitely. And I mean that in the best way possible." The waiter came. They ordered pasta and wine. No one tried to impress the other. They talked. Not in bullet points or resumes, but in stories. Nadia told him about growing up with her grandmother. How she once tried to bake a birthday cake from scratch at age 11 and forgot the sugar. Jamal shared how he used to write computer code on napkins because he couldn't afford extra notebooks. They laughed. They paused. And in the silence between sentences, they listened. When dessert came, neither noticed. They were lost in a conversation about travel and how people chase experiences like souvenirs instead of allowing them to change them. "I've never had a conversation like this on a first date," she admitted, sipping her wine. "Neither have I," Jamal said, and meant it. By the time they left the restaurant, the city had gone quiet. A light mist dusted the sidewalk, catching the glow from the street lamps. "Do you want me to call you a cab?" he offered. She shook her head. "I'll take the train. I like watching people at night. Makes the world feel big, but safe." He walked her to the station, hands tucked in his coat pockets. "I'd like to see you again," he said, just before she descended the steps. "I'd like that too," she replied with that smile again. And just like that, the evening ended. But something had started. For the first time in a long while, Jamal Anderson felt something different stir inside him on the morning of a blind date. It wasn't dread. It wasn't obligation. It was curiosity. He found himself wondering if Nadia still read by the window, if she still kept that sketchbook on her table, if her cat, Pickles was it, still knocked her tea over in the mornings. He wondered if she'd wear the same small crescent moon earrings, or something new that revealed another piece of her puzzle. He even absurdly debated whether to bring her something. Not flowers. That felt too performative. A book? Too personal. Chocolate? Too safe. In the end, he brought nothing. Just himself. He arrived at the cafe they had agreed on, a cozy spot in the village called Velvet Bean, known for its aged wood counters and coffee brewed in small porcelain kettles. No chain logos. No over-designed menus. Just the soft hum of conversation and the gentle clink of cups being set down. Nadia was already there. Again. She sat at a corner table near a bookshelf, leafing through a novel with a faded cover and a torn spine. She looked up, and her face lit up, not in surprise but in recognition. She looked happy to see him. Not impressed, not expectant, happy. He smiled and sat across from her. "You're early," he said. "So are you." "Touché." They ordered coffee, and for the next hour, the world faded. There was no checking of phones, no forced anecdotes. They talked about strange childhood fears, hers escalators, his automatic garage doors, favorite smells, fresh laundry and old books, and things they'd always wanted to try but hadn't. For Nadia, learning to sail. For Jamal, dancing in public. "I've got the rhythm of a broken metronome," he admitted. What surprised Jamal most was how much he shared. How little he had to filter. With Nadia, the mask came off without him realizing it had ever been on. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on his. You seem different, she said thoughtfully. You're not trying to be impressive. He blinked. Should I be? She shrugged. That's what most people do on dates. Especially the ones with titles and tailored coats. He laughed. Titles are boring. Only if you hide behind them. He looked at her, really looked. And what about you? No mask? None worth keeping, she said. I don't have a lot to impress anyone with, anyway. I'm just a girl trying to keep the lights on and finish her degree. But you're more than that. She didn't answer. Just smiled and took a sip of her coffee. The hours slipped by unnoticed. A light rain began outside, tapping softly against the windows. The cafe's ambient jazz deepened in tone. At some point, they moved to the couch by the fireplace, and Nadia tucked her knees under her legs. Jamal didn't move an inch from her side. He told her stories he rarely shared, about his mother, who raised him alone and cleaned offices at night, about the time he pitched his first investor wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, about the years of working silently while everyone else told him to give up. I used to think maybe I wasn't enough, he said quietly. Then I decided being enough was a moving target. So I stopped chasing it and built my own. Nadia reached for his hand. It was simple. No hesitation. Good, she whispered. You seem like someone who knows how to build things that last. They sat there, fingers laced gently, until the cafe began dimming the lights for closing. As they stepped outside, the rain had lightened into a mist, soft and silvery under the street lamps. She didn't bring an umbrella. He didn't either. They walked slowly under the haze, damp hair and quiet laughter between them. Want to keep walking? He asked. She nodded. Always. They strolled through Washington Square Park, past the Arch, past the late-night artists packing up, past students dragging their feet through puddles with their headphones in. It felt like they were in a pocket of time, untouched by the usual pace of New York. At one point, Nadia looked up and said, If this night doesn't end, I'd be okay with that. Jamal looked down at her. Then let's not end it. Let's remember it. How? He paused, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't open an app. Didn't take a photo. He simply tapped the screen once to light it up, then locked it again. There, he said. Now it's a memory. No filters. Just us. Nadia shook her head, smiling. That's the weirdest and most poetic thing anyone's done all week. He grinned. Stick around. I'm full of contradictions. By the time he hailed her a cab, the rain had stopped, and her hair clung in wisps to her cheek. As she got in, she looked back at him and said, I hope I see you soon. You will, he said, closing the door gently. As the car pulled away, Jamal stood there, hands in his pockets, and for the first time after any blind date, he didn't feel exhausted. He didn't feel evaluated. He felt human, and deeply, undeniably seen. The nights grew longer, and the space between Jamal and Nadia grew shorter with each meeting. It wasn't just the number of dates. They had gone to 6 places in 2 weeks. It was how those moments unfolded. Nothing between them felt transactional or performative. It wasn't where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or what do you do for work? It was what song plays in your head when you're happy? And what smell takes you back to childhood? Jamal had never known connection like this. Not even in friendships. They sat on fire escapes drinking coffee. Walked through flea markets, debating the value of ceramic cats. Nadia showed him the bench in Prospect Park where she'd made her most important life decisions. He showed her a tiny bookstore near Canal Street where he used to spend hours, just reading and waiting for life to change. But despite the openness between them, Jamal had held something back. A truth so central to his identity that keeping it hidden began to ache like a splinter in his chest. He wasn't lying to her. Not exactly. But each time she looked into his eyes and said, I'm so glad you're not one of those money-obsessed guys. Or when she joked, what would you even do with $1 billion? Buy 15 cafes and rename them after your cat. He smiled, and it landed like a stone in his stomach. She didn't know. Not yet. Not about the company. Not about the wealth. Not about the way entire city blocks bent around his decisions. She knew him as Jamal. Just Jamal. and that terrified him. It was a chilly evening when he decided the truth couldn't wait any longer. They were on the Brooklyn Promenade, the skyline shimmering like a crown across the water. Nadia leaned on the railing, bundled in a dark green coat, scarf snug around her neck. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, but her eyes were full of warmth. "This place never gets old," she said, gazing at the towers across the river. "Every time I look at Manhattan from here, I feel like I'm watching a place where stories begin." "Some do," Jamal said, standing beside her. "Some begin over there, but they're not always told the way they happened." She turned to him, sensing the shift in his tone. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "I need to tell you something. Something important. And overdue." She watched him closely, quiet now. The city's hum seemed to fade behind them. "I haven't lied to you," he began, "but I haven't told you everything either." She didn't interrupt. "I told you I'm a CEO. That part's true. But I didn't tell you what company I run. Or what it's worth." Nadia narrowed her eyes slightly, her breath visible in the air. "Okay." He took a deep breath. "The company is Anderson Holdings. We're headquartered in Manhattan. We deal in multiple industries: real estate, technology, clean energy, infrastructure. I built it from scratch. It's privately held. Quiet on the outside, but very, very big on the inside." Nadia blinked. Once. Then again. "You're that Jamal Anderson?" He nodded once. "Yes." She stepped back just a little, trying to absorb it. Her mind flashed with headlines she'd skimmed without knowing the face behind them. She pictured the suit-clad men in Forbes articles, the press releases, the billion-dollar merger stories she had ignored because they had nothing to do with her world. And Jamal, her Jamal, was one of them? "No wonder you never complained when I picked diners over steakhouses," she said, half joking, half stunned. "I needed to know who would choose me without the numbers," he said. "After everything I went through, I needed to be sure." She folded her arms, more from habit than defensiveness. "So all those blind dates your aunt mentioned, they didn't work out. They saw what I wasn't showing and assumed that's all there was. I was just some guy in decent shoes. You were the first one who didn't need more." Nadia looked away for a moment, eyes tracing the skyline again. "I thought you were like me," she said, voice soft. "I am like you," he said quickly. "Money isn't who I am. I had nothing once. I remember what hunger feels like. I still walk, not because I have to, but because I choose to. And I'm telling you now because I trust you. Because I don't want there to be any shadows between us." Silence stretched. Then slowly Nadia turned to him. "Okay," she said, almost whispering. He searched her face, unsure what that one word meant. "Okay," he asked. "I don't care how many zeros are behind your name, Jamal," she said, stepping closer. "I fell for the man who stops to help old ladies with their bags and who remembers my favorite poem. That man stood next to me on the train. He walked in the rain with me. And if that man is also running half of Manhattan, then so be it. He's still you." He looked at her like he'd never seen her before. Like maybe she'd saved him from a fear he didn't know had roots. "Are you sure?" he asked, because a part of him still doubted that love could survive truth. "I'm not in love with your company," she said. "I'm in love with your soul." The words stunned him, made his throat tighten. He took her hand, kissed it, and didn't let go. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in cold air and warm truth, the weight between them lighter now. The city behind them no longer felt like something to hide from, but something to walk toward, together. The news didn't break like a tidal wave. It crept in like a sunrise. First, it appeared in whispers, in niche business blogs and hushed boardroom chatter. Then it hit mainstream media like wildfire. The mystery CEO of Anderson Holdings revealed. Jamal Anderson breaks his silence. In the world of high finance and corporate power plays, Jamal had always been a myth, a ghost who wielded massive influence without stepping into the limelight. No one knew what he looked like. No social media. No public interviews. Just boardroom decisions and billion-dollar movements that came from a name with no face. Until now. A photo accompanied the article. Jamal, clean-cut, modest suit, No flashy accessories, no theatrical poses. Just him standing beside a woman with deep brown eyes and a quiet, radiant smile. Nadia. The article didn't mention her name. It only said, accompanied by a close companion. But people talked, speculated, doubted, scrambled. Within 24 hours, Patricia Anderson's phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Why didn't you tell me your nephew was that Jamal Anderson?" came the accusation from one of her longtime friends. Another said, "I just didn't realize we let go of him too soon. My daughter said he seemed unremarkable." Patricia listened politely to all of it, her voice pleasant, her eyes unreadable. She kept her answers short. Sometimes the brightest diamonds don't sparkle under artificial light. Meanwhile, Jamal's inbox flooded. Messages. Apologies. Flirtations dressed up as friendship. Invitations to dinners, fundraisers, charity events. From names he remembered. From faces that once looked at him and saw not enough. Serena. Daphne. Chloe. Bianca. Even Isabel. Each of them had passed him over. Each of them had decided in an instant that a man without obvious wealth wasn't worth their time. And now they wanted another chance. They wrote things like, "You've been on my mind lately. Funny how life works, huh? I didn't realize how unique you were back then. I was young. We all make mistakes. Just wondering if we could reconnect, even just for coffee?" He didn't respond to a single one. Because every second he spent with Nadia made it clearer. Love wasn't a second guess. It wasn't something you realized after the Forbes list printed your name. They were sitting on the rooftop of his midtown apartment one evening, blankets wrapped around them, pizza box between them, when he brought it up. "Do you know how many of them came back?" he asked quietly, watching the stars fight through the city's glow. Nadia didn't look at him. She didn't need to. "All of them." He nodded. 10 for 10. She took a bite of pizza. "I hope they all saw the article where you took the subway that same day." He laughed softly. "You'd be surprised. Some of them called that part charming." Nadia smiled, then leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever feel tempted?" she asked, not from jealousy but from curiosity. "No," he said without hesitation. "Because they didn't see me, they saw what I didn't show. Or what I didn't pretend to show. You were the only one who never made me perform." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm proud of you, Jamal. Not for the money. For walking through all that and not losing your center." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. A folded piece of paper. She opened it. It was a sketch of her. A messy little drawing done in pencil. Her at the cafe. Head tilted. Reading. Smiling slightly. "You did this." "I can't draw," he admitted. "But I tried. That's how I see you. Still. Always." Her eyes welled up. "Jamal," she whispered. "I don't need the skyline. I just need this." By spring, the engagement was official. No flashy press release. Just a dinner with both families. Hers shy and overwhelmed by Patricia's grandeur, his surrounded by affection and formality. The ring? Simple. A round-cut sapphire surrounded by 2 smaller diamonds. Not because it was rare, but because blue reminded him of the first night they met. Of the dress. Of the calm. Patricia stood beside Jamal one afternoon as they looked out over the garden she'd chosen for the wedding. "You were right," she said finally. "I was looking in the wrong places." Jamal smiled. "We both were. Until she walked into your grocery store." Patricia chuckled. "I should lose my wallet more often. Only if she's not around to pay for it again." They shared a rare, soft moment. A silence of satisfaction. One night, a news anchor closed a financial segment with the words, "In an age where billionaires buy validation, Jamal Anderson chose anonymity and found love instead." A reminder that some fortunes aren't measured in numbers. And in an apartment filled with books, mismatched mugs, and a cat named Pickles knocking over houseplants, Nadia read that line out loud, laughing. "Validation?" she said, turning to Jamal on the couch. "Tell them we're still paying student loans and our cat's a menace." He pulled her into his arms. "Let them think what they want. We already won." The sky above the Hudson River was soft that morning, brushed with streaks of pale pink and amber. A hush hung over the private garden on the estate grounds, broken only by the rustle of ivy on the wrought iron trellis and the distant murmur of birds shaking off the spring chill. It wasn't a palace or a hotel ballroom. No helicopters hovered. No celebrity chefs, no drone cameramen darting through the air. The space was intimate, deliberately so. A walled garden tucked behind an old stone manor on the edge of Tarrytown. Patricia had insisted on paying for the venue herself. Jamal had tried to refuse. She refused his refusal. "If I only do one thing for your wedding," she'd said, brushing imaginary lint off her lapel, "let it be giving you a place where it feels like time stops." She wasn't wrong. The stone arch at the center of the garden was wrapped in wild roses and baby's breath. Hand-woven lanterns dangled from the low-hanging branches of the trees, gently swinging in the breeze. Rows of wooden chairs, no more than 40 in total, faced the makeshift aisle lined with moss and white petals. No centerpieces. No fanfare. Just nature, softened by human hands. Guests arrived in quiet cars, their names not famous but known. People who mattered. People who had walked through storms with them, not around them. Nadia's mother wore a second-hand gown she'd kept in storage for years, tears already lining her cheeks before the ceremony even began. Her father sat 2 rows back, nervously wringing his hands, trying to contain emotions he hadn't had words for since Nadia was 6. And Jamal, he stood by the altar in a navy suit, no tie, hair slightly tousled by the wind. He looked calm, but his fingers twitched against his pants seam as he waited. Then the string quartet began. No, Here Comes the Bride. Just a gentle rendition of La Vie en Rose, slow and meaningful. Nadia stepped into view. She wore a gown that Patricia described as deceptively perfect. No glitter. No corset. Just flowing cream silk with a low back and a trail that fluttered behind her like breath. Her hair was swept up with a few strands free. In her hand, a bouquet of lavender, eucalyptus, and white daisies, picked not purchased. Everyone stood. But Jamal didn't see them. He only saw her. She walked barefoot down the moss-lined path, the only ornament a thin anklet that had once belonged to her grandmother. When she reached him, she smiled, not the wide-posed kind, but the one that came just before her eyes crinkled. "You made it," she whispered. "I've been waiting my whole life," he whispered back. The ceremony was brief. A friend of Nadia's officiated, someone who had seen her at her lowest and highest. Her voice was steady as she guided them through their vows. Jamal went first. "I spent years building walls to protect myself from people who only saw my title, not my truth. But you saw me before the world did. You saw the version of me no one else asked to meet. And I promise, every day for the rest of our lives, I'll spend proving that you didn't fall in love with a secret. You fell in love with me." Nadia's lips trembled, but she didn't look away. "My whole life, I was told fairy tales belonged to other people. That people like me got lucky if love found them in between rent checks and bus rides. But then you showed up, with a quiet heart and loud loyalty. And suddenly, I believed in something bigger than luck. I believed in us. There were no gasps. No applause. Only silence. The kind that wraps around 2 people and makes the world invisible. Then the officiant smiled and said the words that made it real. You may kiss. And Jamal kissed her. Not as a CEO, not as a man with power or wealth, but as a man who had been saved by a chance encounter, and who now stood in front of the only person who had ever loved him without conditions. The reception was held under hanging lights strung between trees. Wooden tables with mismatched chairs. Laughter spilling into the air as plates of roasted vegetables and handmade pasta were passed around. Pickles the cat, smuggled in a discreet carrier by Nadia's best friend, roamed between guests' feet like he owned the place. Patricia gave the final toast. She stood, champagne flute in hand, dressed in a silk dove-gray suit with a single brooch shaped like a tulip. "Love," she began, pausing until every gaze fell quiet, "is not a merger. It is not about names or numbers or legacy. Love, real love, is recognizing the rare and choosing it over the easy. I've known Jamal his whole life, and I've never seen him look more free than when he's looking at Nadia. She raised her glass. To the woman who reminded my nephew that wealth means nothing without wonder. And to the man who finally stopped hiding his heart. May your fortune always begin with each other. Later that night, after the cake was eaten and the candles flickered low, Jamal and Nadia slipped away. No exit car. No crowd. They just walked. Through the garden. Through the gravel path. Through the night. I don't feel like a billionaire's wife, Nadia murmured. You're not, Jamal said, tugging her hand gently. You're my wife. And that's better. They looked up at the sky. And beneath a moonless sky full of quiet stars, they disappeared into the dark. Two souls who found each other not through the eyes of the world, but in the quiet spaces where true love lives. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.